There's a lot of broadcasts on today, everywhere, every
Yeah.
day, I guess.
Oh, I know.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today for this discussion. I'd like to first begin by acknowledging that I'm here on Treaty 4 territory, the traditional territory of the Cree, Saulteaux, Lakota, Nakota, and Dakota, and the homeland of the Métis. My name is Thomas Johnson. I work for the RPL Film Theatre, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this discussion with Marjorie Beaucage, Lisa Myers, and Jessie Ray Short. And this is on the occasion of the retrospective screening of the work of Marjorie Beaucage. We have 3 programs of videos that'll be presented this week, by no means exhaustive of Marjorie's work, and this was curated by Lisa Myers originally for Imaginative in 2018. This includes a new set of videos from Marjorie's collection that will be screened this Saturday. I do welcome you to watch these videos online through our partnership with Vukavu or in person at the RPL Theatre in Regina. If you are here in person, the first program is this Friday at 7 p.m. The second program is Saturday at 3 p.m. and the last is at 7 p.m. on Saturday. And I'm just including the link here for the films in the chat box. After this talk, there will be an opportunity for a Q&A, and if you do have any questions, you can include them in the chat here below, and we will respond. And now I'd like to introduce Lisa Myers, who will be facilitating this discussion. Lisa is a member of the Chi-Min-Ising Beausoleil First Nation. She works as an independent curator, artist, and also as assistant professor at the Faculty of Environmental and Urban Change at the York University. Recent curatorial projects include touring exhibitions, Beads, They're Sewn So Tight in 2018, Carry Forward 2017, and Win On Dwa Min, We Hear Them in 2016. Her writing has been published in many exhibition publications, in addition to journals and art periodicals. Myers has an MFA in criticism and curatorial practice from OCAD University. She is Port 7, Ontario based. Thanks so much, Lisa. Oh, Lisa, you're muted.
There. Okay, with the same enthusiasm, thanks, Thomas. I'm really honored to be here and to be reunited with Marjorie Beaucage, and to be in conversation for this as sort of an opening to this retrospective that I originally curated for Imaginative. But in 2018, and by doing that, I really got to know the integrity of Marjorie's filmmaking and the way that she works. It's just been such a pleasure to get to know her more. So, in addition to that original program, you have a special opportunity here to see a third program. So the 2 that I first curated, but there's a third one for here at in Regina, unique to this program. So it's an additional screening of newly digitized works by Marjorie, including in this iteration of the series. So that's an additional thing, an additional sort of program to it. So it's kind of special, not just what they saw at Imaginative. There's something added here. And I want to also welcome Jessie Ray Short to this conversation. I requested that we invite Jessie because I know that working with Marjorie as a mentor was an important part of your practice, Jessie, and your practice as a Métis filmmaker, and I want you to be here to be part of this honoring of these multiple of her legacy, but also to represent the importance of intergenerational support and to acknowledge that this is what we do for and with each other. We support each other, and we learn from each other, and we have these kinds of exchanges and conversations. So thank you for joining us here tonight. I'm just gonna, thanks, George. And I'm gonna read each of your bios so that we get to hear all of the things, the amazing things that you've done and you do. So Jessie Short is a curator, writer, and multidisciplinary artist and emerging filmmaker whose work involves memory, multifaceted existence, Métis history and visual culture. She obtained an MA degree in 2011 and an undergraduate degree in 2006, and has also received grants from the Canada Council for the Arts and Ontario Arts Council for curatorial and filmmaking practice. Short worked in the Visual Arts Department at the Banff Centre for the Arts, and she also spent 2 years as the Executive Director of the Aboriginal Curatorial Collective in Toronto, Ontario. She is currently working on various contracts as a curator and documentary filmmaker, and also including at the Mackenzie. Marjorie Beaucage is a proud Métis two-spirited filmmaker, cultural worker, and community-based video activist. Her work as a community-based independent artist seeks to question, empower, and change the ways we look at ourselves, seeing from the inside out. Marjorie was a co-founder of the Aboriginal Film and Video Art Alliance, which was a precursor to the Imaginative Film and Media Arts Festival, Media and Arts Festival. As a runner, she worked as a cultural ambassador to negotiate self-governing partnerships and alliances with the Banff Centre for the Arts, VTAPE, the Canada Council for the Arts, which resulted in the development of Aboriginal arts programs. She also programmed the first Aboriginal Film Festival in Toronto in 1992. In 2018, Marjorie received the Artist Excellence Award from the Saskatchewan Arts Awards. Marjorie has been making, and so that's the end of your bio, but I want to say some things, and I'm gonna read a little bit because sometimes I get caught up in my words. So I'm reading because I sometimes have a better time getting what I think a little bit out in my writing. So I'm just gonna read a little bit and talk about your work. And so Marjorie Beaucage has been making film and videos for more than 30 years, and her unique filmic language of layered images, non-sync sound, and shared communal space within her films are just a few of her contributions to the genres of documentary and experimental narrative filmmaking. Her practice is about valuing and sharing the tools at hand. Many of her projects have created spaces for individuals and communities to tell their own stories, sharing personal and underrepresented perspectives within communities. And this creates conversation, not conversations that have to be viewed by an outside audience, but as a tool for communities to harness and make their own. Her work is respectful, honest, and involves mentoring, building relationships, and creating connections. This way of making in relation to the world is what I learned from reading the writing of a scholar and filmmaker, Trinity Minha, where she refers to the concept of speaking nearby, which is, and I quote, this is what she wrote, a speaking that reflects on itself and can come very close to a subject without, however, seizing or claiming it. In this way, Beaucage brings nuance to the stories that continue to travel into our present. So that I just wanted to acknowledge that that's the kind of way that, you know, this kind of, even this idea of standing in the middle, or and not actually not even like standing in the middle and being able to convey story, but without it being about you, objectifying it or making it yours. I think it's just such a important like ethic and way that you work. So I want to just, before we get started in our conversation, one last thing is I just want to talk about the context and some of the markers of Métis history that are in our midst this past year, and these, you know, in the past month or so. So October 2020 marks the 176th anniversary of the birth of Louis Riel. And this past May also marked 135 years since the Battle of Batoche. And last year, Saskatchewan declared October to November 10th, the month of Métis. And so I think there's like all of these really important, all of these important markers that we're sort of speaking together today, with keeping them in mind and thinking about that legacy. So you're both in Saskatchewan right now, and Marjorie, I know where you live. You're a bit closer to, or you can correct me if I'm wrong. You live a little bit closer to the site of Batoche, and this retrospective honors that legacy of resisting imposition and oppression of the colonial state, you know, of that battle, and and also your work reveals, concealed histories that are so important throughout. It does more than that, but there is of course an element of showing the resilience of Métis people from historical points and to the present. So, and your films do many things, but presenting Métis history is one of them, what I just said.
Mhm.
Anyway, so I wanted to talk about that, the stories that you carry, and maybe your personal connection to this history, and how you hold them in this present time. Over to
Hi,
you, Marjorie. Hi. Hi.
Hi, Thomas. Hi, everybody out there. It's good to be here, and thank you for showing this work. I'm here because that's who I am. I'm Métis, and even though a lot of my work isn't about Métis specifically, it is part of who I am. So it is part of being a resistor. It is part of being a survivor. It is part of being self-governing. It's part of all these values that I grew up with just because of who I am. And even though it took a while for me to come into an understanding of what it means to be Métis, because we didn't grow up with culture, didn't grow up with sashes and fiddles. Well, we had fiddles, we danced, there was lots of socials and lots of kitchen parties, but like we didn't talk about being Métis, like it was just who we were. It wasn't something that was talked about, like cultures lived. And also there was a period that I came out of that my family, my grandmother and others were ashamed of being Indian and having that, and they suffered because of that. So they tried to protect us from that, and if we could pass for French, we did. And it wasn't talked about either, but it was. That's how they survived. That's how they protected us, I guess, by keeping us in that invisible world, hiding in plain sight. But it was the way that they did, and it even to this day, my mom sometimes, she goes, "Oh, why are you doing all that Indian stuff?"
Yeah.
And at the same time, there's other times when I do that stuff for our family, like when someone dies or there's ceremonies, weddings I've done for the family, funerals. Uh, I bring these things and they're appreciated. So it's that both and.
Do you think that relates to that idea of inside out, like this concept of thinking about stories and telling their own stories? That I don't know if it relates to that idea I've heard you talk about before, seeing from the inside out. Do you think that does that relate to that scenario that you're kind of talking about, or is it something different?
Well, I think it's a little bit different, but it is. It's certainly not from the outside. It's like what you're living, and connecting with the present. That's how I look at inside out. It's like I'm not looking from the outside. I'm part of it. But it's like, how do you find your sense of belonging and your identity if you don't have a voice? And so that's why it became important for me to have my voice and to figure that out for myself, and not to be shy about it. And it's not like you have to broadcast it, but at the same time you have to own it And I
Yeah.
guess that's part of owning yourself. Otikimsawaka. People who own themselves, that to me is owning who you are in everything you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
So,
sorry, I had this thought and then I just took it what you just said, and then it just like left me. Do you think, Jessie, would you like to add to that a little bit? Thinking about that idea of knowing and being, bringing yourself to, and thinking about your, just like that idea of as, being a mentee of Marjorie's, and maybe there's something there that connects to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I met Marjorie, I think it was like in 2012 or somewhere around then. When I came to Saskatchewan, when I was working for the Aboriginal Curatorial Collective, and I was very like taken with her work. She gave a speech. She talked about all the Indigenous artists, who had come before that time, and especially, going back into, well, I guess it's not that far back, but it's relative, right? Like sometimes, it does feel far back. So like the 90s, the 1980s, the 70s, the 60s, even like, I was really fascinated with the talk that Marjorie gave, and also the video that was shown there,
Mm-hmm.
which was the speaking to their mother, with, Marjorie interviewed Rebecca Belmore, and yeah, she was so knowledgeable and so I don't know. It's funny because sometimes I get mad at my dad, who's Métis, and I'll ask him questions. Like I've been asking for questions forever. Like, do we have family in this place, or where is that place? And he kind of says like, oh, I don't know. Yeah, I don't think so. And then sometimes we'll be like in 2010, we went back to Batoche together. So that is an event that happens every July at the Batoche, well, across the road from the Batoche historical site, because the actual site of the battle is owned by Parks Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And so Métis people can't actually just like go be there. I mean, I guess we can. I think there's sort of some agreements, but like ultimately, they want you to pay to go in and to this place where, potentially you have ancestors who fought and maybe died there as well. So Back to Batoche happens just across the road from the actual Batoche site. And my dad and I went there in 2010. And I guess this is, sort of like that thing about living culture. You don't know to separate yourself from it necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
So my dad and I went, and we were walking around, and we met a friend who I had met recently, actually Bruce Sinclair, who I've since worked with. And he just started asking my dad, oh, are you from around here? Do you have relatives here? And all of a sudden, my dad starts talking about having relatives in Big River, and he just starts like naming all these places that I had been asking about for years. And he never told me, but he told this random man that he just met at Batoche. And I was so mad at him. But I don't think he did it maliciously. Like, I think it's just that, I grew up in Calgary, and I knew we were Métis, he told me we're in enemy territory, like the Blackfoot, and, so I knew I knew that about my family, but I think just being out of that context, right?
Mm-hmm.
It didn't occur to him until we were in this very specific place at this very specific time, you know, surrounded by Métis people. And he just started telling all these places to this Bruce that he had connections to. So, I mean, I'm happy I got to be there to hear that.
Yeah. And it's like the place, maybe the place had something to do with that, or the site had something to do with that.
Oh, for sure. You know, there were other things, like he was like, oh, my dad used to make bannock like this. And, you know, just like everything, right? Like it, but I think it's a little bit of, you know, hiding afterwards, because it really was very violent towards Indigenous people in general, especially after Batoche, but especially Métis people.
Yeah.
And this isn't for everyone, you know, this isn't across the board. Some people definitely really had strong identity that they continue to hold on to, but, you know, other people, yeah, it wasn't a safe time. So it's kind of a learned thing too. It's like you don't necessarily identify like, oh, if I do this, that's like Native or something. But also, you know, knowing when it's not safe to act or whatever, be in certain places in certain ways, right?
Yeah, surviving.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a kind of sorry, I'm hearing myself echo back at myself here. Maybe that's a sign. But there's a kind of like self-consciousness that that you both kind of talk about that wasn't always there, you know. I think that it comes out more these days, but I really appreciate you sharing those sort of details of identity and family and the generations of, you know, maybe, yeah, just the sort of sometimes the trouble that people have with being able to talk about who they are. And I really appreciate what you said, Marjorie, about bringing yourself to the work you do and to everything, you know, that you are who you are, and that's why we're here. Yeah.
Well, we're in between. Like that's the other thing too about being Métis is like you're half breed. You're half Indian and you're half white, so you have to own that. You don't belong in either one completely.
Mm-hmm.
But because you're between, you're in a particular position where you can balance things. You have a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not always appreciated because people don't like to be challenged or, you know, and because Métis have always stood up for themselves because nobody else is going to stand up for you. We're usually, you know, we have that energy that's a fighting kind of energy, if you like, or resisting kind of energy, survival. So that's all part of being Métis also.
So when you look back at your work, like this is an opportunity, you know, there's not all your work, of course, we're seeing in these 3 programs, but when you look back at your work, what is it like? Can you see those threads? Or I don't know, what does it look like to look back at the way that people might receive your work now? Like thinking about the way, you know, where you were and what you were thinking about in those different particular, you know, films that you made. But do you have thoughts about about its reception now for people?
Well, when I decided to digitize my work that I made like 25 years ago, because there was this online format now, I realized when I was watching it that some things really haven't changed that much. As a matter of fact, some things have gotten worse. And the things that I was talking about and the stories we were telling, they really still haven't had much of a platform. Like anything that has to do with land or with social justice and not having access to the things that you need, and all of those questions, they're still relevant today. And so I thought if you change the hairdos and the glasses, you'd have it would still be relevant. Like it's still the same questions and issues, you know.
So like maybe, for example, in the second program that's coming up, that Peace, Land, Solidarity, and Healing, is that the international one? Is that the one that...
that's with the youth and the elders conference about land solidarity and healing, and it was at the time of Oka and clear cuts and all the battles across the land, and in all the countries around the world too, like it was happening. And so it was QSO that put it on, and they had like $5,000 or something. They wanted a video, so they asked me, like, "I'll cheapo here." No, well, it's like most of my films are like that. Like they don't have money attached because the stories or the causes or the issues are not funded. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I just do them because I can. And it is a part of my toolkit for social changes that I could do videos. And at that time, there weren't that many people doing it, you know, from the inside out, let's say. And so, you know, a lot of people would come when there was conflict or something violent for the news or something like that, but they didn't bother about finding out what was really going on. And they never talked to the real people. They just talk to their experts, you know, at the universities. And no offense, but you know, they're not always
I take no offense at all. You can take shots at the university anytime on my...
you know, the people are not connected to the community necessarily at most universities. So
and like you said, you document, I mean, Land Solidarity Healing, I appreciated seeing it. I really appreciated the conversations that were happening. And like, this is 1993 that it was happening, where people from nations all around, like, so there are people from South America as well as North America, right? And they were...
the Maasai.
Oh, yeah. So totally international, coming together to talk about land injustice and I totally agree. Like those, we can look back at that, and we might be like, we can watch this film and think very easily, like, what's happening now things haven't changed too much.
You know, how is it different? You know, like, how is it different? I don't think that the Canadian people have really dealt with that land issue,
No.
and treaty and rights and Indigenous. Even acknowledging that they are on Indigenous land, like they still think it's theirs, like what they bought fair and square, you know. They don't really consider it our ancestral homeland.
And just thinking about like Canadian industry, like that, or mining and stuff, how they are in so many countries around the world.
The same
terrorizing their Indigenous people.
So there's a kind of
rainforest.
Imperialism that, and I feel like that piece really kind of touches on that. And one, if I could just maybe talk about, Métis Rose. So in terms of documentary, how do you know when there's a story that needs to be told? Because I'd just like to hear what you have to say about that, and if you want to kind of reference any of them. I'm really interested to hear you talk about Métis Rose and the making of that. But in general, like, how do you know there's a story that needs to be told, or how does that hit you, or you know?
I don't know. It just comes to me. People ask me, or I happen to be in a situation where something's going on. So sometimes I'm a witness and I just take my camera out. Sometimes people ask me, you know, or we're having a conversation about something, and usually there's some kind of relationship or connection to the person or the issue that we share. And out of that, it's easy enough to do the video because there is that relationship and that connection and that need to let other people know what's going on, or who this is and why it's important to understand different ways of being, like whether it's FASD or HIV or Two-Spirit, like those have been some of the ones, or literacy, or like wherever there's a need for people to get out of that box and not stay stuck in that label.
Yeah.
That's where I feel, that's where I find myself, and in that position, being able to break it open and show people and let them, have a different take on it.
And yeah, in video, I see that video is that tool that helps in that process, right?
Yeah. I used to do popular theater and other art forms, to do the same work. And then once I got the film training, and that was just like another piece for social change, my toolbox, and we didn't have access to that piece in the Indigenous community. And it was important when I realized how powerful it was and why we were so absent from it. And I thought we got to create our own space. So that's how it ended up, evolving into the work that I had to do. It always seems to, I don't know, the ancestors, they always seem to put me in this path somewhere that needs something changed.
Mm-hmm. And so Métis Rose, how did you come to make that? So Métis Rose is part of the first program on Friday, November 13th.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was just struck like by this amazing woman, such a, like, her life. And anyway, but how did you come to be making that film?
I'm living in her house. I mean, Métis, she was. I met her through working with. I came to in 2000. I came here to work with Dizaines and Métis Co-op of artists that were trying to do a partnership with Parks Canada, and to have living history at the Métis homeland and not just the past, and that we would own our stories and our telling of it. And Rose Fleury was part of that. She was one of the elders in that co-op, and she was also the elder at Batash. And so that's how I first got to meet her, and then it never happened because of politics. But Rose was selling her home here. It's a Gabriel Dumont's niece's home.
Wow.
A cabin that was built 125 years ago. But this little Métis shack was her home for 60 years, and she was needed to sell it. She couldn't stay here by herself, and her husband had died, and her kids wanted her in PA. So that's how I met her. And then in the process of that, she's also was doing genealogies and for everybody, and that was her passion. And anyway, she had tons. She was an incredible woman, and she raised 19 kids in this house, 9 of her own and others, and she had all these stories. And then one day she asked me to write her biography. And I said, well, Rose, I said, you got a really big life. I don't know if I could do that. And I've never done that. I'm not like a writer of that style. But I said, how about I start collecting stories with video, and we'll see where it goes. I just record them, and then if maybe it'll turn into a book, maybe it won't, but maybe it'll turn into something. So she said yes. So then whenever she'd call me and she'd say, well, let's go for a drive here, or, and then she'd tell me stories like where she was born, where her grandfather's house was, her grandmother's house was. Turons Coulee, where her ancestor, that's where the second battle of the resistance occurred. And it was her ancestor, that Madame Turon, that turned away Colonel Middleton, because he took her horse and buggy, and she demanded it back, and she got it. She was very formidable. And so because of who she was and all these stories, and so over 2.5 years, I went to a lot of road trips around Saskatchewan here and this area, and to family gatherings and different things. And over time, I came to think, well, wow, who is Rose Fleury and the essence of Rose, and that's what I was trying to get. And her spirit was so strong, and she was so committed to Métis, and she started the first local in PA. She worked with Métis women and children with housing and different things up north, and she was just so involved and so committed to Métis, and I thought people should know who she is, and they, some people in the education circuit, knew who she was, and around here, but like really people didn't appreciate her, I don't think, because she wasn't promoting herself. She was always promoting Métis, and she just would go to schools and talk to kids. She'd tell stories. Like she just always out there.
Yeah. So she really is. She asked you to do this.
Yeah.
And she invited you into her life, which is very
beautiful,
and obviously into her house.
It was an honor. I felt like I was on a pilgrimage with her through her life. And I felt also that she was coming to the end of her life, and she was like making peace with it. And like and telling me these stories over time, and some of them she told me over and over, and I thought these must be really important. Like, why is she telling me this again? Like, I didn't realize it at the time, but when I was watching the tapes later, I realized that there was always another layer being added, and she was working that stuff out. And it was a real lesson for me about aging and about how to make peace with your past and the things in your life, and reflecting on them that way.
And she's such a, like, just from seeing the film, obviously I never met her, but from the film, she's such a strong person. It kind of comes back to that idea that you talked about like a self-governing, like she's a force, and the things that she endured and the ways that she, like, I think, I was just really blown away by her. And I really encourage everyone to check that program out. And it's like, she is not only, it's a kind of personal, like I guess her strength and her personal endurance. It tells a lot about Métis history, but it also tells about this really personal kind of story that is so important, I think. I guess. Do you mind? I wanted to ask you. I don't want you to give away any of the gems of this other film that's in the third program, but it's the Métis vignettes, the Make History or Be History. I was wondering if you can tell us a bit about what inspired these and when did you make them, and a little something, just a little hint to make people curious, but don't let it.
Oh yeah, that was another time I had a big mouth, and I was I was at a meeting at the University of Saskatchewan for they were developing a online Métis history course for distance education. This was before COVID. They were so that people didn't have to leave their homes to go to school, and so they could come to the classroom at the university without leaving, or they could gather at PA or in another community and watch this video classroom, and so they were looking for ideas for how to do this, and I said, well, it doesn't have to just be talking heads. I said you could cut in historical footage and do more creative things and all of that. So I just threw that in there, and then a few days later I got a call to hey, would you want to work on some video stuff for the course? So I said sure, okay, and this was like I took the course out and looked at it like unit by unit or class by class, and And then for each section, I created a little 2 to 5 minute video vignette to introduce that section and maybe throw a different angle on it. And then I had all these historical shots to cut into the lecture so they didn't have to look at the instructor the whole time.
Oh, that's good. That'd be handy these days. We're all remote teaching.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hey, I was ahead of my time. What can I say?
Yeah, you were cutting edge. Totally. You still are.
Well,
Yeah.
I find myself there are so much actually that I sometimes I'm so far ahead I feel like I'm behind. There's nobody behind. It's like it's weird, but now I've kind of gotten used to it. Like that's part of who I am, like that
Yeah.
kind of bushwhacker, cutting a path through the woods and trailblazer, whatever. But
Yeah.
that is part of who I've been, and it comes out in the work that I do also.
Yeah, I'm glad that even though you're way ahead of us, we got to catch up with you.
Well, that's what I told Imaginative when they finally showed my work. I said, well, I guess I've slowed down enough. You caught up to me now.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of, the trailblazing and making paths for the people that, follow. I mean, that kind of can take that nice segue over to ask you, Jessie, about what film has been a strong influence on you that Marjorie has made, or if you want to be more, talk more generally about like what does it mean to you as an early career Métis filmmaker to be aware of Marjorie's work. And because I remember, I remember, I forget where we were, but you were saying I'm going to spend time with my mentor, and I was like, oh, I forget, we were somewhere. I feel like we were in the West somewhere. I was out, we were at something.
Oh, maybe when you were in
okay,
Banff or
that's it.
something.
Yeah, and you said,
you might have been
I'm
in
going
Banff.
to spend time with my mentor in Duck Lake. And I was like, oh, okay, that's, great. And then I was like, who's your mentor? And then you said, Marjorie Beaucage. And I'm like, really? I said, I was just reading some essays by her and I just wrote this thing. She was sort of percolating, and I was like wanting to get to know her, find out, so it was really cool that you had, that you were going to see her. And so anyway, coming back to it, like, do you want to talk about like what does it mean to you to have been working with Marjorie, have Marjorie as a mentor, and if you want to mention some of her work that you influenced you. Anyway, I'll stop asking the question, let you answer.
I just got big. I took up the whole screen.
It happens when you talk.
Okay. It was, well, I was mentioning that I met Marjorie in like 2011 or 2012 at this like Carfax, Saskatchewan meeting about Indigenous artists. And yeah, at the time, like, I just remember hearing her speak and being like, wow, who is this person? Like, she's fascinating. And I was also starting to like think about doing my own film projects at the time. One that I'm working on now and have been basically working on since then about my great uncle Edward Beaupre, who is still the tallest man in Canada, and he was a Métis man, actually, French Canadian and Métis from Willowbunch, Saskatchewan. So I really had in my mind that I wanted to do that, but I knew that I had no idea how to do that. But I could write grants. I knew how to write grants. And so I figured I needed to find a mentor, and I just like had no idea who that person would be. And I just kind of, after the event, which is where I saw Speaking to Their Mother, which is the film with Rebecca Belmore from like the 90s, I think, sometime.
Yep.
About her work.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, and I just was, I mean, it's Rebecca Belmore, she's, kind of a total art star, but it was in this very different way than I'd ever seen her spoken about or written about or like presented. Like, it was this very, I got the sense that it was the kind of way that she might like to be presented, because, I think her work is very much based in community and being, making work for community rather than for the art world necessarily.
Yeah.
And that really came across in this film because they're just like out in the bush. It's not like a glamorous setting or anything. But they're out in the bush. It's summer, and there's like a lot of different. There's kids. There's like elders. There's everyone in between is there, and they're all just kind of doing their thing. Speaking to the megaphone, speaking to Rebecca with Rebecca's work, and
yeah, and it was a clear cut.
Yes, that's right. It was a clear cut. Yeah, so it's not
Wiggins
like really.
Bay.
Yeah, it's not really a place that you would think like, oh, we should do an interview here. It's not like a slick, sexy kind of thing, but it was very real and it felt very grounded. And so me knowing that I wanted to do this project about my ancestor, but also knowing that I had like zero experience in film of any kind, I just thought, this person seems like she might be into it. Like maybe, I don't know, maybe she'll help me. And I kind of just like cold called you, Marjorie. I think I just like ran after you in the hallway after you spoke and was like kind of, was like, I thought that was really great. And I'm Métis too. And I, like, it was really quite perfect, actually. And you said, I asked if you would mentor me, and I had intentions to, kind of work through this process. And I think I was pretty clear, though, that I really didn't know much about it. And you said, sure. I was just like, okay, like, it was kind of flooring. But I mean, also from that time, just watching more of your work, it's really cool, all of it, because you catch like, I think maybe you go like, and I'm still learning how to do this. I'm not a very good interviewer. I don't think, like, it's something, it's really tricky. And so the first time we actually interviewed my aunt was here in Regina, and Marjorie, like, they'd never met before, but you just like put my aunt at ease. And, also my aunt really hated talking about Métis stuff and was just like, never wanted to talk to me about it, and would be kind of mad about it, And this was like the first time I'd ever seen her be open. And it was just like, I think Marjorie, like, kind of talking about that, at the very beginning, recognizing something in somebody else. Like, just the way that you interacted with her, and you were joking and laughing and helping yourself to food in the fridge. And she just like, she was so different than, she'd ever been. And she talked. She actually like spoke fairly openly, about things that I wanted to know about. And I remember at one point, Marjorie, you went outside to have a smoke, and my auntie was like, "Hey, is she Métis?" Like, and I was like, "Oh yeah." And she was like, "Where's she from?" And I was like, "Oh, somewhere in Manitoba in the south. I'm not sure what community though." And she's just like, "What's her name?" She's like asking me all these questions. And I was like, "Beaucage." And she's like, like, it was great. It was very wonderful to see her interact that way. And there's obviously, there's something that she recognized in you that made her very comfortable. And
I don't think about it as interviewing. It's about having a conversation. It's about making relations, and that's the most important thing. So if you think about having to be professional, interview, I never had a script. I never had a script for any of my films ever. That's why I couldn't apply for grants or anything like that, because I didn't have a predetermined film in mind. Because for me, the film process, it's a search. It's a search for what's there in that moment in time, or that person. And so it's being present. It's being in that moment, standing in the middle of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right in the middle of the story, you don't know where it's going to take you, but you follow it. And like with your aunt, it was easy because I got lots of aunties like that too, and it was just like
Right.
just be yourself and connect with people. That's all. That's the most important thing. And then the stories come out. They always do, and you just hold them. You know, you just hold that space for them.
So
I think that I just learned something new just now. So the mentorship continues. But
me
I
too.
mean, it's interesting that you're saying that, Marjorie, because you're right. Like I was I was young. I was like in my mid-20s or something. And I just was nervous and I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
But also I always had this, I always felt like I had to separate out these parts of myself. And growing up in the prairies as like a queer person is not super awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting that you say that because it's like something that I spent a lot of time hiding from a lot of my family, actually. And so, yeah, there was totally like a barrier.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, I can relate to that as well. Yeah, coming out a little bit later in life as a part of it. I was just thinking about this kind of having a conversation and not having a script, Marjorie. And I'm going off my script here, but I'm curious now then what the editing process is like for you, because when a film kind of emerges that way, then it's a lot about collecting and searching for the story, but it's also about how do you put it together when you're in the edit suite, right? So I don't know. Do you have any?
That's the magic.
I'm curious
That's
to
the
know.
magic. Oh, that I love editing.
I love editing too.
It's like basically I'm a poet at heart too. So it's like it's distilling down to the essence, eh? Like no, that's why most of my films are short.
Yeah.
To like, what is the essential thing here? Like, what is it that I need to put out there for people to see, or for people to hear, or to think about, or to feel, or to connect with, and finding that essence. Like so I get out of the way, I just see what's there and dig through. It's like it's like a digging through the colonial trash, and like really wanting to not stick to not portray people in the way that people have been portrayed in the past. It's like as victims or as terrorists, or all those labels. Like I always try to get past. I try not to use any of that language or labeling or um,
Yeah.
all of that in telling the story, and trying to grab the truth of that moment or that person and put it out there and let people think for themselves. Like I don't tell them what to think. I don't narrate. I don't have no voiceovers. I let their voice speak, and for people can and have some breathing room in there so people can think through that issue, or that follows that person's life, or whatever it is.
Yeah, I like that. I like that, thinking about that. It's like, yeah, I could see it being like poetry. Like you cut it down to the smallest sort of idea or image, maybe on each line or something. And like, so each shot, you kind of slowly sift through and see what's extraneous or like doesn't really what isn't actually clear in what you need and what you don't need in the editing process.
It has its own beat. You can't be attached to every shot and to everything, like so many people are. The films are 2 hours. It could be 90 minutes or an hour, like because they fall in love with. They've got so much stuff on the cutting room floor, and it's like, well, it's not for this.
That makes me think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's the way it is. It's like it's got a life of its own, and you got to let it find its own way.
Yeah. But that makes me really excited, and I know that we're probably running low on time, but something I've really thought about is recently is about the outtakes or and the source tapes, right? Like that is your archive, though. Like even if that didn't make it into your film, like what where like that's such an important archive of you, Marjorie, which I think we got to think about. We got to think about what you probably thought about it, but suddenly I'm thinking about it. And now Jessie maybe is thinking about it too.
Well, yeah, and I was just going to say, like, a lot of these videos, you know, some things I've heard before, some stories and historical events and stuff, and a lot of it I haven't. Some of these people I've met, yeah, I did meet Rose just before she passed away. I know Maria's still alive, and you know I've known Maria, but a lot of these people have passed away, and it's so like just because I've heard about, you know, Jim Brady, but like just to actually see the person talking, you know, it gives you a different sense of who they are and what they were talking about and what it meant to them. It's really important for me, like especially because Métis history is so, I feel like it comes in waves, you know, maybe when people are mad at us, I don't know, but like
or it's the same old stories you hear over and over again, or it's just Louis and Gabriel, right?
Yeah,
that's what you hear.
So it's so important for me to see these things because it's that much more makes all this work I'm doing so much more rich.
Yeah.
So I have taken up. We were going to leave a little bit of time for questions from the audience. So if you have any questions, we do have about 4 minutes left, and we can maybe address one of them. But if not, I also have lots of questions and curiosities here to keep the conversation going and get to spend more time with you here, Jessie and Marjorie. So I'll just see if I'll keep my eye on the chat, but otherwise, let's just keep chatting. Oh, people are wonderful to talk. They're liking it. That's what I'm seeing here. I don't want to. Okay, so let's keep going. We'll take the thank yous though. Thank you. But we'll keep any other questions. Do you have any? Oh, I know. I wanted to ask about So I want to keep thinking about that. About those source tapes and things that archive that's so important to the filmmakers that are coming up. But also, I like that you, Marjorie, what I really respected and things that we've talked about is that way that you work, that this, you know, I don't know if it's over, I don't want to use a wrong term, but like a kind of do it yourself, like it needs to be done. I'm going to do it. I'm going to bring my camera with me. You know, this kind of, it's not like an industry, you know, you're never worried and got distracted by having some kind of industry standard to live by. And I think that's really important. And that's why the work feels so vital. And I think that's what maybe has also got you to places where you were doing really kind of personal stories, like really like for good grief in particular was, you know, is a very, very personal kind of story. And I'm just wondering if from doing those really kind of personal pieces, or even just, you know, capturing those moments like in the mall at in Saskatoon, I think it was, are there lessons that you've learned from doing those? You know, what are the big kind of lessons that you've learned through those moments?
Well, my first film, Bingo, it's personal.
Yeah, that's right.
And Good Grief is very personal.
Yeah.
I didn't know when I made Bingo that was my first one. I was exploring everything. But when I did Good Grief, and after I did Good Grief, I realized that telling your story is medicine. I mean, that became like really, really out of those two films, I realized what it did for me. And I thought that so many people could change things, or, you know, transform their pain or their sorrow or their victimhood or whatever the trauma they were carrying, like by creating. So to me, the power of creation is transformative, and I experienced it in my own personal storytelling. So that's what I then focused on, and because we were searching for ways to restore our storytelling tradition and oral traditions and put them in contemporary form like film. That was always something that we were working with, like Loretta and Maria and the whole alliance. Like we were all working towards that. I mean, and now look at, she made Monkey Beach. Loretta just put it out there, and it's like all those elements that we've been struggling for so long to put on the screen and create that medicine. Like that's how I felt it in those little films of mine. And you know, if it was on a bigger scale and more people could see who we really are inside, and like the spirit of who we are, the soul of who we are, and not just the pain of who we are, or the trauma, or the, you know, like this is what I then began to work with. And that's why my work sort of meshed that, making medicine and giving people those tools to tell their stories. That's how it evolved.
That's great. That's a great, I hope a great, really nice note to sort of maybe bring our conversation to a close, because we're at that time. And we're getting a lot of thanks in the chat there. Thanks for the wonderful evening. All right, great.
I don't see any chats anywhere. How did you? Was there anybody here? No.
Yeah, there's people.
I just found it too. I was like, who's saying this?
Yes, it's kind of nice to not see them all, but it's because we can just keep talking and not feel self-conscious. But yes, people have been watching and they're commenting under the comments here, and there's lots of thank yous. Yeah.
I'm not used to this steam machine or whatever it's called.
StreamYard. Yeah, me too.
Well, the CPR or what rolling through our land?
Yeah. Oh, Kathy, hi, Kathy. Yeah, she said thanks so much. Yep, people are saying thank you. So it's really nice to see that people are there because we can't see you from this little platform.
Yeah,
it's reassuring. But actually, in a way, it was kind of nice to not be too conscious of them. For me, anyway, I get a little nervous.
Yeah, we're just having a visit anyway.
We're just having a chat, a visit. People are saying love you, Marjorie, so that's nice too. Okay, so I guess that brings us to the end for now. It's a real, yeah, I learned a lot by just, thanks a lot, Marjorie Beaucage, because, you know, when you talk about just be present, you know, just be in the present, be here, you know, don't worry about your script and things. I do fumble over my words, so I need a little something to help me, but I also can balance that with, yeah, being present and just being really listening and being able to respond. And I think that's the key to these, you know, really having a good exchange and building relationships. So, and I really appreciate just you coming along too, because I think it's a nice to have you both here and to have, and I think there was this, oh, I'm just going to blab on now. I when I was young, my cousin passed away, and my mother wasn't one to be like wanting to drive a bunch of kids around in a car at all. Like she just did not, she would not drive us anywhere, but she said, we have to go to this funeral. We have to go. And we went, and she drove us there. And then years later, as an adult, I was going to a funeral at a community near me, and a woman who I really cared a lot about, an older woman who passed away. And she said, and I was driving there and I was alone, and I thought, I didn't have any kids. What did I? But anyway, at the same time, I was thinking about how important it is to witness these things and to learn, you know, how as a kid, I witnessed how my mother, you know, somebody, you know, that it was important that we went, you know, when people needed us, our family needed us. And so anyway, I'm just talking about the power of being witness, you know, and just, I think that just being here and the, you know, there's lots of things to witness, but like having this conversation, I think in part is kind of witnessing and learning from each other. And I think that's so important. And so I'm trying to bring along a lot of more witnesses in my life, I guess. Anyway, gotta go. Gotta stop talking. It's been a good day.
Thank you for inviting me. It's really nice to be in the same virtual room as both of you, Marjorie and Lisa. Thank you.
No, Metakwe Oyasin, all my relations. That's what it's all about, you know. And you're my good sisters and friends and supporters, and I appreciate having conversations with you anytime.
Yeah. Me great.
Always good to explore.
Awesome.
Where we're at, learn from each other.
Yep. Take care, everybody. Have a good night. I don't know. Signing
Thank
off.
you. Thank you.
What do we do? Do we